The United Nations, a beacon of hope in a world ravaged by war. Born from the ashes of World War II, it embodied humanity's desire for peace. Its mission to prevent conflicts, uphold international law, and promote cooperation. For decades, the UN has played a vital role. From peacekeeping to humanitarian aid, its efforts have saved lives. Yet today, the UN faces a crisis of legitimacy. Its influence is waning, its authority questioned. The world has changed dramatically since 1945. The Cold War's bipolarity has given way to a multipolar world order. Globalization has interconnected nations but also exacerbated inequalities. In this complex landscape, the UN struggles to adapt. Its structures seem ill-equipped to address the challenges of the 21st century. This is most evident in the Security Council and its controversial veto power. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine lays bare the UN's limitations. Russia's invasion, a blatant violation of international law, has been met with international condemnation. Yet the UN Security Council, tasked with maintaining peace and security, finds itself paralyzed. Russia, as a permanent member of the Security Council, holds veto power. This means it can single-handedly block any resolution, no matter how egregious the violation. This has effectively rendered the UN powerless to take concrete action against Russia's aggression. The consequences are dire. Ukraine is ravaged by war, its people suffering immensely. The conflict has also sent shockwaves through the international system, undermining the rules-based order that the UN was created to uphold. The UN's inability to act decisively in the face of Russian aggression raises serious questions about its effectiveness. It exposes the flaws of a system where a single member can hold the entire world hostage to its own interests. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is another stark example of the UN's limitations. For decades, the UN has been involved in trying to broker peace in the region, passing numerous resolutions condemning settlements and calling for a two-state solution. Yet, the conflict continues, fueled by deep-seated mistrust, violence, and a lack of political will. The UN's efforts have been repeatedly stymied, often due to the veto power of the United States, a staunch ally of Israel. The US has consistently used its veto to block resolutions critical of Israel, even when such resolutions have enjoyed overwhelming international support. This has led to accusations of double standards and undermined the UN's credibility as an impartial mediator. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, exacerbated by the blockade and recurring conflicts, further highlights the UN's struggles. While the UN provides vital aid and assistance, its ability to address the root causes of the conflict remains limited. The veto power held by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the US, Russia, China, France, and the UK, lies at the heart of the UN's current predicament. Originally intended to ensure great power cooperation, it has often become a tool of obstruction and national interest. Critics argue that the veto power is undemocratic and anachronistic, reflecting a global order that no longer exists. It gives undue influence to a select few, while ignoring the voices and concerns of the vast majority of UN member states. Furthermore, the veto power creates a climate of impunity, allowing permanent members to act with little regard for international law or accountability. This undermines the very principles of equality and justice upon which the UN was founded. The debate over veto power is not new. Calls for reform have been made for decades, with many proposing limitations on its use, particularly in cases of genocide or crimes against humanity. The UN's effectiveness is also hampered by broader geopolitical realities. The world today is characterized by shifting alliances, rising nationalism, and great power competition. This has made it increasingly difficult to find common ground and build consensus on pressing global issues. The rise of China in particular has created new tensions within the UN system. China, with its growing economic and military might, seeks a more prominent role on the world stage. This has led to friction with the US, which is determined to maintain its global leadership. The rivalry between the US and China plays out in various UN arenas, from the Security Council to specialized agencies like the World Health Organization. This competition often hinders cooperation and undermines the UN's ability to address global challenges effectively. Furthermore, the increasing influence of regional organizations such as the African Union and the European Union adds another layer of complexity. These organizations often have their own agendas and priorities, which may not always align with those of the UN. Section 6. A crisis of legitimacy? The UN's declining influence and its perceived inability to address pressing global challenges have led some to question its relevance in the 21st century. Critics argue that the organization is outdated, bureaucratic, and ultimately ineffective. They point to the UN's failure to prevent or resolve major conflicts, its susceptibility to political manipulation, and its often glacial pace of decision-making. They argue that the UN has become more of a talking shop than a decisive actor on the world stage. This erosion of trust and confidence in the UN is a cause for concern. The UN remains the only truly global forum where all nations, regardless of size or power, can come together to address shared challenges. The UN's legitimacy rests upon its ability to uphold its core values of peace, security, human rights, and development. If it is seen as failing to do so, its authority and influence will continue to wane. Section 7. Reform or fade away. The challenges facing the UN are undeniable. The need for international cooperation is most acute in times of crisis. The question is how the UN can be reformed to meet 21st century demands. Reform efforts should address structural deficiencies. This includes revisiting the veto power in the Security Council, making the organization more representative and democratic. The UN must adapt to the changing geopolitical landscape. This requires engaging with emerging powers like China and India. Ultimately, the future of the UN depends on the political will of its member states. Section 8. Beyond the headlines, the UN's unsung victories. While the UN's shortcomings often dominate headlines, it's crucial to acknowledge its significant, albeit often overlooked, achievements. Away from the geopolitical maneuvering and power struggles, the UN quietly makes a difference in countless lives every day. The UN's humanitarian agencies provide life-saving assistance to millions affected by conflict, natural disasters, and poverty. From delivering food and medicine to providing shelter and education, the UN is often the last line of hope for the world's most vulnerable populations. The UN also plays a vital role in promoting sustainable development, combating climate change, and advancing human rights. Its agencies work tirelessly to eradicate poverty, improve global health, and promote gender equality. These efforts may not always grab headlines, but they represent the UN's core values in action. They demonstrate the organization's enduring commitment to building a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world for all. Section 9. A new hope for the UN? The UN stands at a crossroads. Its relevance in the 21st century is being questioned as never before. Yet the need for global cooperation and a rules-based international order has never been greater. The challenges are immense, but so too are the opportunities. By embracing reform, adapting to a changing world, and reaffirming its commitment to its founding principles, the UN can reclaim its role as a beacon of hope and a catalyst for positive change. The world needs a strong and effective UN. The question is whether member states have the political will to make it so. The future of global governance, and indeed the fate of humanity, may very well depend on the answer.